Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the Noontime Live show to kick off your weekend here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'd like to welcome my first guest, former Superintendent of the Rhode Island State Police, Colonel Brendan Doherty. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate your coming in because big news this week out of the state. Governor Gina Raimondo tapping former Major James Manny to be the new head of the Rhode Island State Police. And you know James Manny well.
I know him well. It's great news for the state police, and I commend the governor in making such a great selection for the future of the state police, because we take a lot of pride in our state police here in this small state, the good work that they do, and have it's such a storied tradition in the Rhode Island State Police, and the folks who work in the trenches, the rank and file, are very proud of what they do, what they represent, and I'm proud of them, and as the former superintendents are as well.
So tell us a little bit about former Major Manny. He took an interesting path, was there at the state police, then he went to be manager of Narragansett, the town manager there. But tell us about his role when he was in the state police. To give us a little background about him.
Yeah, I actually met Jim Manny when he was a Secret Service agent. He was a Secret
you go way back.
Yeah, I go way back with Jim, and then he was a very, very good uniform trooper, and showed leadership qualities, and was promoted through the ranks of the state police. And I think when I retired, I was superintendent from 2007 to 2011. I think when I retired, he was a lieutenant or a captain, and he was in charge of a specific division, barracks, and he just did a great job. He was a go-to person, and he has a nice way about him. He's tough on crime, but he's actually very, very compassionate, and understands that there's people that, especially in this the environment that we've come through in the last few years. Some people are hurting for money. Some people are out of jobs, out of work, and some people need help. And he was also always quick to volunteer. When I started the community outreach program, Jim Manny was, like I've said before, it was service before self, and he did a good job. He understood that what we were trying to, aside from being state police officers, we also had a responsibility to the community to build that trust, and we did that through the community outreach program.
And you mentioned, again, going back with his work with the Secret Service. How does that play into his credentials and how it prepares him to be superintendent?
Well, that's a good question. How that plays out is that he has a good understanding of how the federal agencies work. The Secret Service, people think of the Secret Service as the protective arm of the federal government for the president's security and whatnot, and other dignitaries that come to this country. But it goes beyond that. He was also involved in the Secret Service. Do a good job with bank fraud cases and credit card schemes and things like that. So especially in this difficult time of identity theft in this country, Secret Service do a good job there. Jim was involved in some of those cases years and years ago, and then so he understands how the U.S. attorneys work, and the FBI and the DEA and other federal agencies he would have worked with. But he always had I remember talking to him back then. He just loved the Rhode Island State Police. He was a Rhode Island guy from Cranston, born and raised in Cranston, and wanted to become a trooper. And he made it into the academy and did very well, and has had a great career. And I'm happy that he's back.
And so he's, having been with the state police and then going to the town manager position in Narragansett, he's got some civilian experience. What does that bring to the table?
Yeah, that's a good thing, because I had retired from the state police. I was the first one to retire from the state police and then come back again as superintendent. And you actually do, you learn a lot once you step out of the ranks of the state police. You learn a lot about how businesses run and whatnot. And so he's learned a lot about budget and how to run a town. So he'll know how to manage the state police budget very well, and how to be conservative with the state police budget.
And let's talk about outgoing Colonel Anna Sempko. She's gotten a lot of credit for recruiting a more diverse class, and just want to talk with you a little bit about that, the role of the diversity plays in the state police.
Well, sure. That class that they're talking about has not started yet. It's, I believe, begins sometime in January. I'm retired, so I shouldn't comment on when the class starts, but I've heard it's sometime in January. But I do know from talking to Ann and from talking to others that she put a heavy emphasis on diversity and did a nice job with that. I recall when I was a superintendent, I ran a school in 2011, and we had a heavy emphasis on diversity. But sometimes you struggle because there's sometimes folks decide at the last minute not to accept that position in the academy or whatnot, and it changes the numbers and what you're looking at to become a more diverse organization. And why do you want to do that? Because you want to be reflective of the society you serve. And so I think Ann did a good job there. She certainly put a heavy emphasis on it, and I've spoken to Lieutenant Colonel Philbin about it, and I know that they have worked hard in that area.
And so when he takes the role, looking ahead to 2019, from your perspective, what will be the biggest challenges for him as he takes the position, if, again, that gets appointed by the Senate?
Well, what are the biggest challenges? Well, he'll have to set his own mark as far as highway safety, criminal investigations. The state police has always been there for the people of the state of Rhode Island in political corruption cases, for example. So that comes under the Detective Bureau, and they work very closely with the Attorney General. And we have a great new Attorney General, and Peter Nerona, who's worked many of those cases. I worked many of those cases with Peter throughout the years, and that's something that Jim Manny he'll have to sit down with the U.S. Attorney's Office, with the Attorney General, with the Police Chiefs Association, and with his rank and file, and they respect him. They're happy to have him on board. So that's something that will be first and foremost in his mind. But I have to say, the outgoing superintendent, Anna Sumpico, worked very hard in the last 2 years, and she's to be commended for her work.
And so you talk about the role of the state police obviously looking into things such as political corruption. When Colonel Sumpico took the charge, obviously the specter of 38 studios was still looming. One of the sort of big stories nationally that we're seeing around different states are investigations into various dioceses pertaining to sexual abuse and assault in decades past. If it were to bubble up to that level, could that potentially be something that the state police would be involved with?
Oh, there's no question the state police would be out in front of that, because there are cases, if a complaint came into the state police, they would have a responsibility to investigate that, and as they have in the past, and that includes many cases from the diocese. The diocese has always, in my view, cooperated in those cases, and I'm sure that at some point the new superintendent, Jim Manny, will be assessing those cases.
Anything else you want folks to know, especially pertaining to the role, having been there, that maybe you don't think the sort of average Rhode Islander knows what it's like to oversee an entire state police?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a good opportunity for me to talk about the state police in the respect that they're sometimes the last bastion of ethical hope in some cases, only in some cases, where they have to take a good hard look. I remember when I was superintendent of the state police, there were a couple of cases where other people just didn't want to look in that direction. And I had a fiduciary responsibility to do that, and which resulted in criminal cases. But ethics and fairness and honesty first and foremost, and are hammered home every day with the members of the state police. And I'm just very pleased with what they've done over the years since I've left, and I know they will continue to under the tutelage of and under the leadership of Jim Manny.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come back here into the studio to give us a little insight into the future head of the Rhode Island State Police here. So Brendan Doherty, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.